Episode 1. The afternoon I found them. I want to start by telling you that I loved her. I know that's the first thing people say when they've done something they can't explain, something that required a decision about another person's life, their knowing, their not knowing. I know it sounds like the beginning of an excuse. I'm asking you to understand that I mean it the way you mean something that cannot be argued with, something structural. I loved her the way certain walls hold up certain buildings, the way the absence of a thing would bring everything else down. I am telling you this because I need you to understand what kind of weight I was carrying when I made the decision I made. Because without that understanding, what I'm about to tell you is just cruelty. And I refuse to let you believe it was cruelty. You need to know what day it was, not the date, the quality of it. It was October, late in the afternoon, and the light coming through my mother's bedroom window had that particular October character, the one that looks like apology, low and amber, coming sideways through the glass so that everything it touched looked like it was already being remembered. I was there because she had asked me to get her reading glasses from the nightstand. That's the whole reason. Reading glasses. The kind of errand that takes 45 seconds and then you're back downstairs and your life continues in the direction it was already going. Her room always smelled the same. Lily of the Valley, which was the perfume she'd worn since before I was born. And underneath that, something fainter, more domestic ironed cotton. The particular clean smell of a room that is always tidy. She was a woman who made her bed every morning before anything else. Before coffee. Before opening the curtains. I grew up watching her do it, watching her pull the sheet smooth from one corner and then cross to the other, precise and unhurried. And I used to think it was a kind of prayer, something she performed before the day was allowed to begin. The reading glasses were on the nightstand on her side of the bed. I saw them immediately. I picked them up. And then, I don't know what made me open the nightstand drawer. I want to tell you there was a reason, some noise, something shifting, some premonition, but that would be inventing comfort for myself, and I've made a decision not to do that here. With you, in whatever this is, I opened the drawer because I opened it, because the drawer was there and my hand was already near it, and in some parallel version of my life, my hand does not move toward it, and I go back downstairs with my mother's glasses, and everything that happened next does not happen. But in this life, in the only life I have, my hand moved. There were 37 letters. I counted them 3 times. Not immediately, I didn't count them that afternoon. That afternoon, I could barely see them clearly. They kept going in and out of focus, the way objects do when your body is doing something involuntary, when your nervous system is making decisions ahead of the rest of you. But later, after what happened next, I counted them. 37, all of them, in the same handwriting, and all of them addressed to my father. My father's name on the front of each envelope, in a hand I didn't recognize, and the return address was a street in a city I had never heard my parents mention. A city about 4 hours from ours. A city that might as well have been on the other side of the planet. They were bound with a rubber band, not stacked, loosely bound, with intention, as if they had been organized. As if someone had looked at this collection of things and decided they belonged together, that their togetherness was a category, that it deserved to be preserved. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Bound with a rubber band, in my mother's nightstand, on her side of the bed. I didn't open any of them that afternoon. I stood there in the amber October light in my mother's tidy bedroom, and I held them and I understood, not all of it, not yet, but the shape of it, the way you understand something when the understanding comes before the specific knowledge, when your body knows what your mind hasn't yet been given the information to confirm. I understood that these letters were not mine to find. I understood that they had been kept, not hidden. There is a difference, a significant difference, and I will come back to it. Kept, deliberately, in a place where they could be located by someone who knew where to look. And my mother knew where to look. My mother always knew where everything was. I put them back exactly as I found them. I closed the drawer. I went downstairs. I gave my mother her reading glasses. She was watching something on the television. something with voices I can still hear but can't identify, a murmur of television in the background of a moment that had already split my life into before and after. She looked up at me and said, "Thank you, sweetheart." And I sat down in the chair across from her and I watched the television and I did not say anything. That was the afternoon. That was the beginning. I need you to understand. I did not make a decision that day. The decision would come later. End quote. What happened that day was just knowledge, arriving the way it always does, without warning, without preparation, without the decency to ask if you were ready. I was not ready. I have never, in my life, been less ready for anything. But I want you to notice something, and I want you to hold it while I keep talking, because it matters. It will matter more as we go. My mother's nightstand, my mother's drawer. 37 letters addressed to my father, kept in my mother's side of the bedroom for reasons I did not yet understand, in a city that had never been mentioned. Not once in 42 years of my knowing them. She kept them. She kept them. I'll let you think about what that means. I'll come back to it. Episode 2. What he was in that house. My father's name is Gerald. I need you to have his name, because the moment I start talking about him without giving him a name, he becomes a symbol. And he's not a symbol, he's a man. And the fact of his being a man specific, particular, with a specific face and a specific way of clearing his throat before he says something important, and a specific smell of cedar and coffee, and something underneath those that I have never been able to name, is the entire reason any of this is complicated. He is 71 years old, as I am telling you this. He lives alone in the house where I grew up, in the same bedroom where my mother kept those letters, in the same bed, and when I go to visit him, which I do regularly, because I am a person who does the things that are expected of her, who shows up, who maintains the appearances that make family life possible. I sit at his kitchen table, and we talk about my children and the news, and whether he needs anything from the shops, and the whole time, the entire time, there is something enormous in the room with us that neither one of us names. He knows I found them. He has known since the week after my mother died. I'll tell you how I know he knows. I'll tell you everything in the order it happened. But first, I need to give you my father, the way I had him before the drawer, before the letters, because the man I had before is the measure of everything. He is the unit against which all of it has to be understood. My father grew up in a small town in the north, one of 4 brothers, the son of a man who worked in a mill and a woman who never wasted a word. He was not educated in the way that people use that word to mean university and letters after your name, but he was intelligent in the way that actual intelligence works, which is quietly and in all directions at once. He could fix anything mechanical. He could read a room. He understood what people needed before they asked for it, and he gave it to them without making them feel like they needed it, which is a skill that is rarer than any degree. He married my mother when they were both 24. I have photographs of the wedding. There is one in particular. It is on the mantelpiece in the house. It has always been on the mantelpiece. All my life, it has been in that place in which they are standing outside the church, and my mother is laughing at something my father has just said, and my father is watching her laugh with an expression on his face that I have looked at for 42 years, and that I would describe without hesitation as a man who cannot believe his luck. They were, I need to find the right word. They were together in the way that some people are together, and I don't mean physically present, I mean aligned, pointed in the same direction, making a shared thing in the world. He came home from work and she was there. She went out and he noticed the absence. I grew up inside that alignment, and I took it to be one of the facts of the universe, something like gravity, something that had always been there and would always be there, solid and reliable, and not worth examining, because examining it would be like examining the floor to see whether it would hold your weight. It holds your weight. That is what floors do. My brother Daniel is 3 years older than me. He is the kind of person I love him. I love him without qualification. Please understand that who moves through the world in a straight line? He makes a decision and then he enacts it. He has never, to my knowledge, spent significant time wondering whether the decision was right. He is not a cruel person. He is simply someone in whom the muscles of doubt are underdeveloped, or perhaps have never been needed. He married a woman named Rose who is fundamentally good, and they have 2 children and a house in the suburbs, and a life that makes, from the outside, complete and perfect sense. Daniel adored our father. Adored. Past tense. I use that deliberately, not because he doesn't love him now, but because the quality of that love has changed since our mother died, in ways I have watched from the outside with a terrible and specific grief. Daniel and our father used to spend whole Saturdays together, fixing things, driving to the hardware shop, speaking in the shorthand of shared activity. When our mother got sick, Daniel came every weekend. He would sit with her while my father went for a walk, which is something my father needed. The walk, the 10 minutes of being alone with air moving around him. And I watched Daniel do this willingly, cheerfully, without resentment, and I thought, this is a good man. This is a good family. Whatever we are good. I told you my father understood what people needed. I want to give you one specific example of this, because otherwise it's too abstract. It's too easy to say a person is perceptive and leave it there. Here is the specific thing. When I was 17, I was in a relationship with a boy I'll call Thomas, which is not his name, but close enough that I feel his presence when I type it. Thomas was my first serious love, or what I understood at 17 to be serious love. And we were together for 8 months, and when it ended because he ended it on a Tuesday, in the car park behind the library, with a gentleness that somehow made it worse, a kindness that felt like mercy, and which I understood in my body as a kind of death. I cried for 3 days. I didn't tell my parents why. I said I had a headache, a fever, something viral, and my mother believed me, or chose to believe me, and she brought me tea and let me be. On the 4th night, my father knocked on my bedroom door. He didn't ask to come in. He just said, through the door, "Do you want chips?" Which was the thing we did, he and I, specifically when something had happened that needed not to be discussed directly. We got in the car and we drove to the chip shop at the end of the high street, and we ate in the car, in the dark, with the engine still ticking, and he didn't ask me anything. He didn't say anything about Thomas, or about whatever he'd seen or deduced from 3 days of a daughter pretending to be physically unwell. He talked about football. He told me about a thing that had happened at work that was funny. And by the time we drove home, I was not healed, not even close to healed, but held. I felt held. I felt like I existed inside something that could absorb what had happened to me without being broken by it. That is who Gerald was. That is the father I had. And you need to have him too, in your hands, before I tell you the rest. Because without him, without the specific weight of that love, that particular man, the choice I made, is just a daughter interfering in her dead mother's knowledge. With him in it, with that version of him that I loved and love, it becomes something else, something that I have to stand inside and call by its real name. I'm not ready to do that yet. We'll get there. Episode 3, 37 letters. I went back for the letters on a Thursday, not because Thursday meant anything, but because that was when the circumstances aligned. My mother was at a hospital appointment, a routine thing, nothing alarming yet. She had started having the appointments that become routine when your body begins its long argument with itself, but at this point, we still call them routine. My father drove her. That was the arrangement. He drove her to the hospital and they were gone for 3 hours, reliably, and I had offered to be there in case anything needed doing in the house, which was a lie so thin, I am still surprised my mother didn't look straight through it. I went upstairs. I opened the drawer. I want to tell you what it felt like to hold them. There's a particular quality to paper that has been handled many times. It softens. It loses its crispness. It takes on the quality of a living thing almost. These letters had that quality. The envelopes had been opened and refolded and opened again. Over years I could feel in the texture. And the paper inside, I'm getting ahead of myself. the paper inside. I sat on the floor. I don't know why I sat on the floor. I didn't want to sit on their bed. I couldn't do that. And the chair in the corner was covered in my mother's things, a cardigan, a library book, the small domestic artifacts of her daily life, and the floor seemed like the appropriate place, the right altitude for what I was about to do. I sat on the floor of my parents' bedroom on a Thursday afternoon in October, and I opened the first letter. Her name was Frances. I will give her that. I think she deserves her name even if she gets nothing else from me. Her name was Frances, and she wrote in a hand that slanted rightward, the kind of handwriting that used to be called educated, not because it was elaborate, but because it was clear. Each letter was formed. Each word was considered. You could feel, in the handwriting itself, a person who thought before she wrote, who understood that words were a kind of commitment. The first letter was dated from 26 years ago. 26 years ago, I was 16 years old. I was in the 5th form. I was worried about my mock examinations. I was alive in the particular way that 16-year-olds are alive, which is completely and without any of the armor that comes later, all surface and sensation, and the absolute unquestioned belief that the world is the size it appears to be, no larger, no hidden chambers. The letter was not, this is important, I need you to understand this, the letter was not a love letter in the way that phrase usually operates. It was not passionate. It was not explicit. It read like a letter from a person reporting on her life to someone who needed to know the details of it. She mentioned her work. She was a nurse, I learned from the second letter, a community nurse who covered a large rural area and sometimes drove an hour each way to see a single patient. She mentioned something she had seen that had moved her, a patient, a garden. She mentioned a book she had been reading. And at the end of the letter, in a final paragraph that I had to read 4 times before I fully understood it, she mentioned a child. She called her the small one. She said the small one had said something that week, something funny, and she gave the funny thing in quotation marks, the direct speech of a small child. And reading it, I felt my entire body reorganize itself around the information. The child's name was Ellie. I put the letter down on the floor beside me, and I sat there for a moment, and I listened to the house. The house was silent. It had the particular silence of an empty house that is usually occupied, a populated silence, dense with the shadows of people who were elsewhere, outside, somewhere. A lawnmower was running. The October light on the floor was doing what October light does. I picked up the letter and I read it again, and then I picked up the second letter and I read that. I will not read you every letter. I will not tell you everything that was in them, because some of what was in them belongs to a woman I never met and a child who had nothing to do with any of this. And those are the parts I'm choosing to protect even here, even now, even in this. But I will tell you what I understood by the time I had finished reading all 37 of them. My father and Frances had known each other for a long time. The first letter I found was from 26 years ago, which means the acquaintance, and whatever it was before it became an acquaintance, predated that. The letters spanned 8 years. The most recent one was dated 18 years ago. I am not a mathematician, and I am not going to pretend I didn't do the arithmetic. My father would have been in his early 40s when the first letter was written. My mother was there. I was 16. Daniel was 19. We were already a complete family, already a formed thing, already an entity with a history and a texture, and a mantelpiece photograph of my parents outside a church in 1982. And somewhere, 4 hours away, there was a woman named Frances and a child she called the small one. Ellie would be, I've calculated this and then calculated it again, and the number doesn't change. Ellie would be 32 years old now. She would be 32. She would exist somewhere in the world, a woman of 32, and she would have a father who may or may not have been present in her life, depending on what happened in those 8 years that the letters represent, and the longer time that I cannot see, the time before and after the letters, the part of the story I only know from one side. The last letter was the one that did it. The last letter was from 18 years ago, and it was different from the others, shorter, more constrained, the handwriting tighter, as if the writer had been conscious of limiting herself. It said, "I don't expect anything. I've never expected anything. What I have is enough. What she has is real. And whatever happened in the years between, whatever you've held and whatever you've decided, I want you to know that I don't regret any of it. The small one is remarkable. If you knew her the way I know her, you would not be able to regret it either. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have written that last part. I hope you are both well. I know you are. You always have been, the two of you. That was always the thing I had to hold on to when it was hard. That you were well. F. I put the letters back in order. I bound them with the rubber band. I put them in the drawer and I closed it. And I sat on the floor for a few minutes longer and I thought about what I was going to do. Let me tell you what I knew, sitting on that floor. My mother had a hospital appointment every other Thursday. My father drove her. I had a key to the house. The letters were in the drawer. My mother was dying. We didn't know that yet with certainty. The word hadn't been used, but the appointments had started, and the appointments had a quality to them that you recognize if you've been through it before, a kind of gathering, and I had seen enough to know what was gathering. My mother had a year, maybe two, and in the drawer beside her bed were 37 letters that she had kept, that she had chosen to keep, I reminded myself. And I need you to keep holding that, why she kept them, why they were on her side, what those questions mean. But I'm not ready for those questions yet. I'm telling you what happened in the order it happened. And what happened next was not the questions. What happened next was a decision I made before I'd finished making it. The kind of decision your body makes before your mind has signed off. The most dangerous kind. Episode 4. What fire takes. I didn't take them that day. I want to be honest about that. I went home, I made dinner, I put my children to bed, and I sat on the sofa with a glass of wine, and I thought about them lying there in that drawer, and I thought about my mother coming home from the hospital and taking off her coat and going upstairs probably, and opening that drawer to look at something, her reading glasses, a book, something ordinary, and whether she looked at the bundle of letters each time, whether she had stopped seeing them, whether a thing you have kept for long enough becomes invisible through familiarity the way furniture does. I thought about calling someone. I think about that a lot now. There was a moment, I remember it. I can still locate it exactly. It was the third night after finding them. I was in the kitchen at about 11 o'clock, and I had picked up my phone, and I had my sister-in-law, Ross's number on the screen, my thumb above it, and I thought, Ross is sensible. Ross would know. Rose would tell me what a reasonable person does with this. I didn't call her, not because I thought she'd judge me, but because I understood with a certainty that startled me that calling Rose would mean releasing the information from my own custody. Once I told someone, the letters became real in a different way. They became a problem that other people were inside. Daniel would find out. Daniel would look at our father with his direct, uncomplicated gaze and ask him what this meant, and our father would have to answer, and our mother would be, I kept coming back to this, our mother would be what exactly? My mother was 67 years old, and she was dying. The appointments had become more frequent, and the news from each of them had a specific declining quality, like music getting quieter, in the way that means it's going to end, rather than the way that means it's about to get louder. She had been diagnosed, by then, with the thing that would eventually be named. I won't name it here, because naming it makes her an illness, and she was not an illness. She was not a category. She was Eleanor. She was my mother. She was a woman who ironed her sheets and wore lily of the valley and made her bed every morning before the day was allowed to begin. What I kept asking myself in those 3 nights was, what would knowing do? Not to me, not to Daniel, to her, to Eleanor, who was already inside the process of dying, who had already entered that particular narrowing in which the world reduces itself to the essential and the unessential gets shed, not all at once, but steadily, the way the leaves come off a tree that isn't dying, just preparing. What would 37 letters due to a woman in that narrowing. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but they were her letters. They were in her drawer. She already knew. I've thought about that too. Trust me. Here's what I told myself. Here is the argument I made. I made it carefully, over 3 days, and I am not going to sanitize it for you or present a cleaned-up version that makes me sound more considered than I was. I was afraid, and the fear was making the argument, and I want you to know that I knew that, and I made the decision anyway. I told myself, she may have known in the past, and she may have kept the letters as evidence, or as grief, or as some private form of accounting that had nothing to do with me. And now they are still there because she forgot about them, because she hasn't opened that drawer in years, because she is old and tired, and the space in her that used to hold the weight of this has been repurposed for managing what is happening to her body. I told myself, finding them in my mother's drawer doesn't mean my mother currently knows about them. It means she knew at some point, and knowing what I know about the specific quality of the silence in their marriage, the quality of my father's presence, and the quality of my mother's acceptance, I cannot be sure what knowing meant to her then, and I cannot be sure it means anything to her now. What I was sure of, what I was absolutely sure of, and this is the thing I am going to ask you to understand, not to excuse, to understand, was that finding out now, in the last year or 2 years of her life, would be different from having found out 20 years ago that the same information, delivered at different moments in a life, does different things. That there is a cruelty in telling a dying woman something she has no capacity to act on, no time to metabolize, no future in which to decide what it means. I am not telling you I was right. I am telling you what I believed. On the Saturday after I found them, my parents were going to be out together all afternoon, a thing with their friends from church, a lunch that would run long. I went to the house. I had my key. I let myself in. I went upstairs. I opened the drawer. I held them for a moment. 37 letters. I thought about Frances, who was somewhere 4 hours away, who had written these things in her clear, considered handwriting and had sent them and had apparently, from the letters themselves, received nothing in return. Or at least nothing that remained, no evidence of correspondence from my father's side. I thought about the small one, who was not small anymore, who was a woman of 32 and who had a father, and who may or may not have been told the full shape of what her father was. I thought about my father, who was at a church lunch with his wife, his Eleanor, who was dying. I went downstairs to the kitchen. I took the letters out of the rubber band and separated them into a pile. I opened the back door and I went into the garden. My mother had a metal bucket she used for garden waste. It was in the far corner, under the apple tree. I carried the letters to the bucket, and I took a box of matches from my pocket. I had brought them from my own house. I had thought about that part. I had planned, and I lit a match, and I held it to the corner of the first letter. I need to tell you what it looked like. The paper caught quickly, the way old paper does, and the flame moved with a specific speed, eating the words before I could reconsider them. And I watched the ink disappear into char. The handwriting, her particular handwriting, her considered letters going first, which felt right and also felt like something I'll carry. The smell was specific. Paper smoke has its own quality, different from wood, more intimate somehow, as if it knows it was something red. I burned all 37. I stayed until the last one was ash. I crushed the ash with a stick until it was gray powder at the bottom of the bucket, and then I covered it with garden waste, leaves and brown stems, the ordinary debris of October. I went back inside. I washed my hands. I made tea. I sat at my mother's kitchen table, and I drank it. I didn't feel relief. I want you to know that. I have heard people say that they felt relief after making a decision like this, a decision that removes something, that simplifies a situation. I felt nothing like relief. I felt like someone who has done something that cannot be undone and who is now living in the aftermath of that undoneness, which is a specific and permanent condition. There is no way back from ash. I also, and this is the part I haven't told anyone, Not even in this, not until right now. I also felt, underneath the nothing that was relief, something else. Something I have been trying to name for 4 years. The closest I can get is, I felt like I had done something for her, that I had committed an act, a specific, chosen act in my mother's service. That whatever else it was, whatever it also was, it was the action of a person who loved someone and who made a choice out of that love. I don't know if that's true. I have been sitting with the question for 4 years, and it has not resolved. My parents came home from the church lunch at 4 o'clock. My father pushed open the back door and saw me at the table and stopped for just a moment, stopped fractionally, in the way that means something, and then came in. My mother was behind him, and she kissed my cheek and said she was surprised to find me there, and I said I just popped around. Was that all right? And she said, of course it was. Of course. It was always all right. My father put the kettle on. He didn't look at me for a long time, and when he did look at me, across the kitchen, while my mother was taking off her coat in the hall, his face was exactly the same as it always was. Almost. There was something in it, something I can only describe as recognition, as a person who has been holding something for a very long time, looking at another person who has recently picked it up. A kind of transfer. A kind of, I don't want to say relief, but something adjacent to it. I didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. My mother came back in and sat down and asked what was for dinner. And we were all 3 of us in the kitchen as if nothing had happened, as if the garden were just a garden, as if the October afternoon were just an afternoon. And that is the shape of what we are now, what we have been, the 3 of us, and then the 2 of us, since the 3 became 2. That is the room we all live in. The room where what happened is known but unnamed, where it exists in the walls rather than in the air, where the only way to continue is to not say it. I chose it. I need to be clear about that. I built that room and I invited us all into it, and I closed the door. I keep telling myself she would have wanted this. I keep telling myself she chose this 20 years ago when she kept the letters, that her keeping them was itself a decision about what she was going to know and what she was going to not know and what she was going to let lie. I'll tell you what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that's not true. I'm afraid that her keeping them meant something entirely different from what I've been telling myself it meant. I'm afraid I've been using her decision to cover my own. But we're not there yet. Keep going with me. There's more. Episode 5. The week at St. Bridget's. My mother was admitted to St. Bridget's in the February following the October I found the letters. I want to tell you about that week because it was the week in which I came the closest of all the weeks to destroying what I had done in the garden. There were 3 moments in that week where I almost told her. 3 separate moments where the word, not even a full sentence, just the word, some version of I know, some version of I burned them was in my body, and I held it there, physically, the way you hold a breath underwater. St. Bridget's is a small hospital in the older part of the city, the kind built in the 1950s from brick that has had 50 years to take on the color of the city around it, which is to say it is nearly the color of the sky on overcast days, gray-beige, self-effacing. My mother's room was on the 2nd floor, and it faced a courtyard where someone had planted a bed of winter hellebores that nobody seemed to notice except me and, I think, my mother, who mentioned them twice. The week my mother spent at St. Bridget's was the week the doctors looked at the results they had been looking at for months and assembled them into a sentence. The sentence was delivered on a Tuesday, in a room off the ward, to my father and my brother and me, by a doctor who was competent and kind, and who had clearly delivered sentences like this before, and who did it with the care that a person brings to something they know will be heard over and over by the people in the room, replayed in the dark, memorized without meaning to memorize it. My mother was not in the room. She was in her room with Roz, who had come that day, who had turned up with flowers and a determination to be useful. My mother already knew, in the way that people know before they are told, She had known, I think, since the summer, that particular quality of knowing that is not certainty, but is not its absence either. The knowing that lives in the body before it gets the language. After the doctor finished talking, my father sat very still for a moment. Then he put both hands flat on the table, the way he does the gesture he makes when he is organizing himself, when he is gathering himself up from the inside, and he said, "Right, one word," which meant, "I understand, and I am going to carry this, and I am going to carry it the way I carry everything, which is without drama and without letting it touch my face more than it absolutely must." I sat beside him, and I watched him do this, gather himself, and I felt something that I have to name honestly. I felt furious, not at the diagnosis, not at the thing that was happening to my mother. At him, I felt a sudden, unreasonable, furious love and grief that was aimed directly at Gerald, my father, who was sitting beside me gathering himself, who had been gathering himself for decades, who had been carrying something that my mother had also been carrying separately on her side of the bed, and neither of them had put it down, and neither of them had spoken. And now there was a new thing to carry, and he was sitting there doing it, gathering, with his hands on the table and his one syllable. "Right." I wanted to say, "Right what, Dad? Right what, exactly?" I didn't. I put my hand on his arm and I said nothing, and we went back to her room and we were a family. The first moment, I almost told her, was that evening. Visiting hours ended at 8, and my father had gone for the walk. He needed the 10 minutes of air, and Daniel had gone to get coffee, and it was just me and my mother in the room with the window that faced the courtyard and the hellebores. She was tired. The kind of tired that isn't about sleep but about the permanent cost of being ill, the way it draws on reserves you didn't know you had, and then draws on the reserves of the reserves. She was lying with her eyes half closed, and I was sitting in the chair beside her, and she said, without opening her eyes all the way, "You've been strange since October." I went very still. She said, "I'm not asking, I'm just telling you, I've noticed." And I said, and this was the moment. This was the first of the 3 moments, the one where the word was closest. I said, "Mum, 1," which is not a word, it's a sound. It's the sound you make when you have more to say than language will hold, and you're buying time while the rest of you catches up. She opened her eyes and looked at me, and what was in her look, I have thought about this look every day for 4 years. I have examined it from every angle. I have turned it over like an object, trying to identify every component. What was in it was not accusation. What was in it was not fear. What was in it was something that looked to me then and looks to me now more like, "I know you know, and I know you did something about it. And I am not going to ask you to explain it, because I already understand it, and I want you to understand that I do." But she didn't say any of that. She said, "You don't have to explain anything to me," and she closed her eyes again. I have spent 4 years deciding what she meant. I haven't decided. The second moment was on the Thursday, the day before she was discharged. My father had fallen asleep in the chair he had not been sleeping, in those days, with anything close to adequacy, and Daniel was downstairs, and I was reading to my mother. We did this. I had always read to her since I was old enough to read fluently, and in the hospital it continued. I brought a book each day and read aloud while she rested. I was reading, I remember this specifically, a novel about 2 sisters and a house they inherited. One of those novels where the house is really about the family, and the family is really about the way the past works, the way it arranges itself inside the present, without your consent. I was reading and I stopped. I stopped mid-sentence, and my mother, without opening her eyes, said, "Don't stop." And I said, "I need to tell you something." She was quiet for a moment, then, "No, you don't." And that was the second moment. Those 4 words, "No, you don't," which could mean, "You don't need to tell me because I already know," or "You don't need to tell me because whatever it is, it's done, and what's done doesn't need words," or "You don't need to tell me because I don't want to know, and you should respect that." And reading to me is what I need right now, not whatever you're about to say. I still don't know which one she meant. 4 years and I still don't know. And the not knowing is its own kind of thing, its own room I live in. I kept reading. The third moment was the morning she was discharged. My father had gone to bring the car round, and Daniel was with the nurse going over the paperwork, and I was helping my mother put on her shoes. She couldn't do the buckle anymore with the ease she used to, and I was kneeling in front of her, both hands on her shoe, and she put her hand on my head. She put her hand on my head the way she used to when I was small. I felt it like a specific weight, a specific warmth, and she said, "You're a good girl." Not, "You're a good woman," which is what she usually said, which was how she'd referred to me since I was in my 20s, the updating of the language as I grew. "You're a good girl." The earlier form, the original form, the thing you say to a child who has done something and not said anything about it, and you want them to know you've seen them doing it. I said, "Mom, and she said, "I know," very quietly, very evenly, 2 words. And she moved her hand from my head and she looked at the window and she said, "Those are lovely, whatever they are, about the hellebores in the courtyard." And I fastened her shoe, and my father came back to say the car was outside, and we left. She never mentioned it again. Not directly, not explicitly, not in any form that would require me to answer. 3 moments, 3 places where the room between us opened and then closed, and the closing was her doing, not mine, which is, I need you to understand how much I have held on to that, how much I've needed that to be true, that the closing at least was mutual. Whether I should have forced it open anyway, whether a good daughter forces it open, whether you can say you loved someone if you let them close the door on something like this because it was easier. Those are the questions I live with. Those are the ones that come at 3 in the morning, not the burning, the not speaking. Episode 6. He sat in the front row. She died on a Wednesday in March, 14 months after St. Bridget's. Daniel and I were both there, and my father was there, and Rose was there, and at the end it was very quiet, in the way that endings often are not the dramatic collapse you imagine in advance, but a simple ceasing. The body stopping in the way that all ongoing things eventually stop, with a final increment of reduction and then stillness. She had not been conscious for the last 2 days. I held her hand. I told her things. I want to tell you about the funeral because the funeral is where things stopped being abstract for me, where the decision I had made in the garden stopped being a private internal event and became something that existed in the physical world, in the room where people were gathered, in the specific geography of who sat where and who said what and who did not cry and why. My father sat in the front row, between me and Daniel. Daniel on his left, me on his right. He was in a dark suit that I had helped him choose the week before at the shop in town. He had stood in front of the mirror in the changing room, and I had stood behind him, and we had looked at each other in the mirror, and he had said, "This one?" And I had said, "Yes," and neither of us had been talking only about the suit. He did not cry at the service. I watched him. I watched him the way you watch someone when you are afraid of what their face will show you, the way you look at a thing sidelong, because looking at it directly would be too much. His face was composed. It had the quality of enormous effort, the way a face does when enormous effort has been made to give it a quality. He sat through the service, and he received the condolences afterward, and he shook hands, and he accepted embraces, and he spoke to people with a steadiness that several people mentioned to me after, in tones of admiration. "Your father is remarkable. Your father is so strong." I want to tell you what I thought when people said this to me. I thought, you have no idea what kind of carrying my father has done. You have no idea how long this particular muscle has been in use. And the thought beneath that, the one I didn't let become words even in my own head, not really, not until much later. You don't know what he lost today. You think you know. You think you know what a husband loses when he loses a wife of 44 years, but you don't know the full accounting. You don't know the specific weight of what he was carrying into that church and what he carried out again. Daniel gave the eulogy. He did it well, genuinely well. He talked about her the way someone talks about a person they knew completely. And parts of it, the specific parts, the ones with detail, the ones with her particular sayings and gestures, and the way she did things, made people laugh, which is the best thing a eulogy can do. And I was grateful to him for it, for giving her that, the sound of people laughing at something she would have recognized herself in. There was a woman at the back of the church. I noticed her during the service. You notice things at funerals with a particular attention. The way the mind sharpens under pressure. Cataloging, recording, filing. She was in her 60s, I thought. Or late 50s. Gray hair, cut short. She was not someone I recognized from my mother's life. Not from the church, not from the various social strands of my parents' world that I had been woven into over 42 years. She sat alone. She did not come up to the coffin. She did not come to the reception afterward. I have thought about her almost every day since. I have no way of knowing who she was. I have never been able to confirm in any direction whether the woman in the back of the church was Frances or was connected to Frances, or was someone entirely unrelated who had her own reasons for attending a funeral for a woman she didn't know. Churches are public. Funerals are, in a specific way, communal. People come who you didn't expect. People who had encounters with your person that you were never witness to. It might mean nothing. It might mean everything. After the reception, after the last of the guests had gone, and Daniel and Rose had taken the children home, and the house had emptied, I was in the kitchen washing up, doing the thing you do when you need to do something with your hands in the immediate aftermath of something large. My father came and stood in the doorway. He was still in the suit. He had been wearing it all day, and he had not changed, and there was something almost formal about it, the way he stood in the doorway in the dark suit, as if he were still receiving, still performing the day's version of himself. He said, "Thank you." Just that. 2 words. The same quantity as my mother's I know at St. Bridget's, and I have given them the same amount of thought. And I have arrived at the same conclusion. I know what he meant, and I know I will never be entirely certain. I said, "Don't," which was not kind, perhaps, but it was honest. And I think he knew what I meant too, because he nodded once, and he went back into the living room, and I kept washing up, and we were both, separately, in the same house, held inside the same unspoken thing. After that night, I drove home through the city in the dark, and I thought about the woman in the back of the church, and I thought about my mother's hand on my head, and I thought about 37 letters going to ash in a garden bucket, and I thought about a woman named Frances in a city 4 hours away, who was perhaps 60 years old now, and who had received no letters in return, not any that I found, and who had written the last letter she ever wrote to my father 18 years ago in a handwriting that slanted rightward and said, "The small one is remarkable." If you knew her the way I know her, you would not be able to regret it. I drove home, I went to bed, I didn't sleep. The next morning I woke up, and I had already decided what I was going to do next. I hadn't made the decision consciously. The way I said earlier, the kind of decision your body makes before your mind catches up. My body had spent the night deciding, and when I woke up, the decision was already there, already made, already living in me like a new fact about the world. I was going to find out what happened to Ellie. I want you to understand that this wasn't clean, this wasn't righteous, this wasn't me deciding to do the right thing after years of doing the wrong one. It wasn't reparation, or not only reparation. It was something more tangled than that. It was grief, partly. It was the specific grief of having kept a secret through someone's death and finding yourself in the aftermath with the secret still inside you, unchanged, unanswered, unresolved. The secret that was supposed to protect someone who no longer needed protection. It was curiosity, partly, which is an uncomfortable thing to admit in the context of a person who might be my half-sister. But I have said, I am not going to sanitize this, and I am not going to start now. And I think it was this, under everything, Under the grief and the curiosity and the rationalizations, it was the need to know whether what I did in the garden mattered, whether it made a difference, whether the thing I chose to protect was real, whether the version of my parents' life that I gave my mother to die inside was actually the version she wanted, or whether I invented that for her, whether I decided on her behalf what she deserved to know and what she deserved to die believing, and whether that decision was made out of love or out of something that looks enough like love that I have never been able to tell the difference. I needed to know if Ellie existed. I needed to see if the small one was real. And if she was what then? I didn't know yet. I still don't entirely, but I was going to start. Episode 7, The Address. Finding her took 18 months. I want to be honest about how I used the internet, which is a thing that is both ordinary and slightly horrifying when the purpose is the kind of searching I was doing. I had the city from the return address on the letters. I had the name Francis, which was not enough, not in a city that size, but was something. I had approximate ages. Francis would be in her early 60s, give or take. Ellie would be 32. I had the nursing. Francis had been a community nurse. I started with NHS registers. Community nurses are listed regionally in databases that are publicly accessible, at least in their current form. I looked through the listings for the city, for names, for Francis's. There were 3. 2 of them were too young, based on what I could find. One of them was of the right age, retired now. Her name in an archive of a community health trust that had been reorganized and renamed, and which lived on only in PDFs from the early 2000s. Frances Calloway. She had a LinkedIn profile that she hadn't updated since 2019, but which gave me a suburb. Frances Calloway. I have said the name to myself in the middle of the night more times than I can count. I have said it the way you say a word you've repeated until it loses its meaning and becomes just sound. And I have also said it the way you say a name that belongs to a real person, a name with weight, a name that has lived in the world. I searched for Eleanor Frances Calloway, which was a guess, a reach, the small one with my mother's name in it, which was another reach, but it was the reach that found her. She goes by Ellie Calloway. She is on Instagram. She is a landscape architect, which is a profession that requires, among other things, a sensitivity to the long view, to what things grow into, to the gap between what you plant and what you eventually have. I found this biographical detail in a piece she had been quoted in, a trade magazine article about urban greening projects, and I sat with the irony of it for a long time. Her Instagram is not private. She has 2,000 followers, which is the kind of account that belongs to a person who uses Instagram the way most people actually use it, to document things they love, to stay connected, not to perform. Her most recent posts are from the autumn. A photograph of a park she was working on, a photograph of her dog, a large, ungainly dog with a personality visible even in photographs. A photograph of what I recognized, with a lurch I wasn't prepared for, as the courtyard garden of a house very similar in style to the house where I grew up. She has my father's nose. I recognized it immediately, and I wish I hadn't. It is a specific nose long, with a particular arch at the bridge, and it is on her face in the way that genetic things sit on faces, unapologetically, as if they have always been there and always will be, as if they predate you and expect to outlast you. I have looked at her face for a long time. I have done this in the way that people do things that are slightly terrible and that they cannot stop, the way you press a bruise. I have looked at her face and tried to understand what my father is to her, whether he was present, whether she knew, whether she has his phone number, whether she has ever stood outside the house where I grew up and looked at the upstairs window of the bedroom where her father lived and where her father's other family kept her letters. Whether her letters. I need to stop for a moment. I'm going to say something that I haven't said even to myself, not directly, not in those words. And I'm going to say it here because this is the only place I've been willing to tell the truth. When I burned the letters, I did not only burn evidence of my father's other life. I burned the only physical record of a child who might have spent her childhood looking at those letters and wondering what they meant, wondering if they were read, wondering if the man who never wrote back was, in some form she couldn't name, a father to her or something less. I burned the record of a woman who wrote 37 letters and kept them in a way that suggested they mattered, that she needed to keep them even when keeping them was its own kind of pain. I was protecting my mother. I have believed that. I continue, partially, to believe that. And I was also erasing. I was choosing who got to exist in the story of my parents' marriage. And I chose my mother, and I chose my father's version of himself as I had always known him. And I did not choose Francis, and I did not choose Ellie. And that choice has consequences that I am only now beginning to fully measure. I have not contacted Ellie. I have the ability to contact Ellie. She is right there on a screen. 2,000 followers, landscape architect, photograph of a dog. She is findable. She is a person in the world. She is 32 years old, and she is findable. I haven't done it. I have had the tab open for 6 months. I have written 3 drafts of a message that begins with different first lines each time, none of which are right, none of which are the right form for the thing I need to say, which is, you exist, and I knew you existed, and the thing I did makes me afraid of what you would say to me if I said I was your sister, that I would see in your face the version of all of this that I do not have access to, the version from the other side, from the city 4 hours away, from a woman named Frances who wrote letters that slanted rightward and asked nothing in return. My father knows I have been looking. I don't know how he knows, but he does. Last month, he called me on a Sunday morning. He calls every Sunday morning. It is one of the structures we have preserved from before. One of the things that holds the shape of the family in place, and at the end of the call, after the grandchildren and the news, and whether he needed anything from the shops, he said, "Don't go looking for trouble that isn't yours to find." I said, "Dad." He said, "I mean it." I said, "I know." He said, "She doesn't need." And then he stopped, just stopped, mid-sentence. And the silence on the line had a quality I could feel through the phone, physical, pressurized. And then he said, "Never mind. Have a good week, love." And he rang off. She doesn't need. She doesn't need what? Contact? The complication? To know about the family her father has, the daughter with her father's nose, who burned the evidence of her existence in a garden bucket and told herself it was mercy? Or, and here is where I go at 3 in the morning. Here is the place I keep arriving at and keep leaving because I can't stay in it for too long. She doesn't need to know what he did, which is a different sentence, which carries the implication that she might not know the full shape of it, that she might have a version of him that doesn't include what he did to my mother, and that version is the one he is asking me to protect. He is asking me to do for Ellie what I did for my mother, to choose what she gets to know. I haven't decided yet. I am sitting with it. The tab is open. And then there is the thing I found 3 weeks ago, the thing that is the reason I am talking to you now, that is the reason I could no longer keep this in my own head, that is the reason I am in this room with you, telling you things that I have not told another living person. 3 weeks ago, I was sorting through the things we took from my parents' house. The work of sorting out a parent's belongings is a long and specific grief, a grief with objects in it, a grief that requires decisions. Every object in a house belongs to a version of the person who owned it, and the house itself is full of versions, early and late, and going through them is like reading a life from the inside, finding the record of it in the material. I found my mother's journals. 1. She kept journals. I did not know she kept journals. I had not known, ever, not once in 42 years, and the finding of them 4 volumes, the small kind, hard-covered, the kind sold for the purpose, was itself a kind of rupture, a new discovery of a dimension of her I had not been given access to. I should not have read them. I want to say that first. I know that. I said it to myself as I opened the first one. But the thing about a dead mother's journal is that the normal rules about other people's privacy have changed shape. She is not here to be violated. She is not here to feel seen without consent. What she wrote is all that remains of the inside of her, and I am not. I am not made of the kind of material that puts a journal down and walks away. I am not that person. I don't think most people are, if they are being honest. I read them over 3 days. Not all of them. There was too much. Too much. She had been writing since the 1980s, and the volumes covered years, and the years were full of the texture of her, the daily, small observations, the record of a life lived from the inside. I read quickly, searching. The way you search when you already know approximately what you're looking for. I found it in the 3rd volume. She knew. She had always known. Not always, not from the beginning, not from whenever it began. But she had known since my father came home from a trip to the north. She doesn't name the city. She doesn't name Francis, but the context is clear. She describes a change in him that she recognized immediately. The specific change of a person who has done something they cannot undo and who is now living inside the unreversible she had known since he came home from that trip, wearing the thing on his face that she recognized. And she had not confronted him, not directly, not then. What she had done instead was what she always did with unbearable things. She had organized it. She had made a decision about it. The journal entry dated from 22 years ago, 4 years before the first letter I found, which means she had been carrying it for 4 years before the letters even arrived. The journal entry says, "And I am going to read this to you exactly as she wrote it, because I need you to understand what kind of woman she was, what kind of mind she had, what kind of love is required to make this particular decision. I know," she wrote, "I have known for a while. I've been trying to decide what knowing means, whether it means anything, needs to change. I keep coming back to the same conclusion, and I don't think it's weakness, though I'm aware it might look like weakness from the outside. He is here. He comes home. He is my husband, and he is Daniel's father, and he is the father of the daughter we're going to have. I am certain of that. We have talked about it long enough that I am certain. Whatever happened in the north, whoever she is, it didn't make him leave. He stays. Every night, he stays." End quote. End quote. And I have been thinking about what that means, and what I want it to mean, and what I am going to do with knowing, and I have decided nothing. I am going to do nothing with it. Because the alternative, the confrontation, the accounting, the destruction of the thing we've built costs more than I am willing to pay. Not because I'm afraid, because I know what I have, and I know what it costs, and I know what the price would be. I am choosing to keep him, all of him, even this part, even this, even the part that went north and didn't come back the same, because he came back. And I am choosing what I know, which is the thing I have always done, which is the way I have always operated in this marriage, and I will not apologize for it. I have decided what I am going to know and what I am not going to know, and I am choosing not to know, which is different from not knowing. I want to write that down because I am afraid I'll forget the distinction if I don't. Not knowing when you choose it. Not knowing when it's chosen for you. Those are not the same. I closed the journal. I sat on the floor of the room I had been sitting in for 4 years, in my head, where I had been making the same argument over and over, telling myself that I had given her the death she wanted, that I had protected her, that burning those letters was an act of love and not an act of erasure, an act of protection and not an act of control. She had decided 22 years ago, before the letters arrived, before my October, before my garden and my matches and my ash. She had chosen her not knowing, and I chose it for her again. Not because she needed me to, because I needed to. Because I needed to be the person who protected her, who stood between her and the thing that would hurt her. And I have to live with the knowledge, with the new, terrible knowledge, that she didn't need protecting, that she had already built her own shelter long before I arrived with my matches, that she was never standing in the rain I thought I was shielding her from. She was inside. She had been inside for decades. And I burned the letters for myself. I burned them so that I would be the one who decided, so that I would have the control of it, the management of it, the story of it, the daughter who protected her mother, who made the hard choice, who stood in the garden with the matches and made a decision out of love. I burned them so that I would be in the story, so that the story would have a protector. My mother didn't need a protector. She had already protected herself. I am sitting here now, and I need you to understand what this costs me. This is not the comfortable grief of someone who made a hard choice and lived with it. This is the specific, grinding grief of someone who made a choice and has just discovered that the choice was never theirs to make. That the person they were trying to save had already saved herself, quietly, 22 years before, in a hardback journal she kept in a drawer with no rubber band. I don't know what to do with this. I have not known what to do with it for 3 weeks. I have sat with it every day, and it gets no smaller and no larger, and it does not resolve. And the tab is still open. And Ellie is 32 years old. And my father says, don't go looking for trouble that isn't yours to find. And my mother, who chose her not knowing, who decided what she would keep and what she would leave, who lay in a hospital bed and put her hand on my head and said, "You're a good girl." My mother is ash, the same as the letters, both gone, both past the point of questions, both beyond the reach of any conversation I could have now. Except there is something I have not yet told you, something I found in the journals on the last day in the final volume, in an entry that is dated not from 20 years ago, but from 7 months before she died, from the October of her last full year. The October I was there getting her reading glasses. The October I found the letters. The last journal entry is 4 lines long. The handwriting is different from the earlier entries. Smaller, more careful, the deliberateness of someone whose hand is not what it was. It says, "I think she found them, my daughter. I saw something in her face when she came down with my glasses, and she looked at me the way she's always looked at me when she knows something she doesn't know how to say. I want to ask her, but I won't. I know what she'll do. She'll try to fix it. She always tries to fix things. She doesn't know yet that some things don't need fixing. They just need to be held. I hope she holds it gently. I hope she holds herself gently too." That's all she wrote. That's the last thing she wrote. She knew I found them. She knew, and she waited, and she watched to see what I would do, and she did not ask, and she did not stop me, and she did not tell me what she had already decided 22 years before, which would have made the whole thing unnecessary. She let me make my choice. She let me believe I was protecting her. She let me be the daughter I needed to be. I don't know if that was her loving me. I don't know if that was her choosing, one more time, what I would know and what I wouldn't know. I don't know if she was protecting me the same way I was protecting her, both of us standing in front of each other with our arms out, and neither of us knowing that the other one had already built the shelter, that the rain had already stopped, that we were standing in a garden in dry weather, holding our arms up against nothing. I hope she holds it gently. I sit with that every day. I haven't written back to Ellie yet. I haven't opened a message. I have the tab open. I am trying to decide what kind of daughter I am going to be now. Not to my mother, she is past the reach of my being any kind of daughter, but to the idea of her. To the woman in the journals who chose her not knowing, and who watched her daughter choose it for her again, and who hoped, in 4 lines of careful small handwriting, that her daughter would be gentle. I am trying to be gentle. I'm not sure I know how. The tab is open. Ellie Calloway, 32 years old, landscape architect. Photograph of a dog. My father's nose on her face. The tab has been open for 6 months. Outside, it is late. The same kind of late in which I do everything that matters. The kind of late where the house is quiet and the house is mine, and there is no one else in it to see what I'm about to do. I am going to close the tab now. Or I'm going to open a message. I haven't decided. I have spent 4 years deciding things for other people. I think this one, I'll let sit. I'll let it be unread a little longer. The way she let things be. The way she decided what she would know and chose not knowing, and called it, in the privacy of her journal, a choice. Not knowing when you choose it. Not knowing when it's chosen for you. Those are not the same. She was right. She was right about everything. And she is ash, and the letters are ash. And the only thing left that is not ash is a woman of 32 with an ungainly dog and a landscape architect's eye for the long view, who exists in the world without knowing that in a house in a city 4 hours away, a woman is sitting in the late quiet with a tab open and a journal on the table beside her and 4 lines of her dead mother's handwriting that she has memorized. I hope she holds it gently. I am trying. I'm trying.